Welcome, everybody. I'm Tom Beccaro, and welcome to Politics in Perspective as we close out September. And what a week it's been. Seems to be always very interesting in politics today. We have a great show for you today. We're going to talk about Prop 50 in California and my new committee, Election Fairness, which is going to oppose Prop 50. And then we'll go to Trump's place in history with the Reagan biographer, Craig Shirley. I know you're going to enjoy that. And in our political roundup, we'll talk about the Comey indictment at long last. You might have my opinion right in it right there. And of course, Kamala Harris made the rounds this week with her tell-all. And I'll tell you why it's really just an end-all. So let's get right to it and start with my opening segment, the opening argument, Prop 50, and why it matters to you no matter where you're watching this show today. Prop 50, what is it and why does it matter? And what is my committee, the Committee for Election Fairness, know on Prop 50? Well, I had a long history in California politics. I used to be the Republican Party chairman, among other offices. I've done probably 2,000 plus events in that state, helping out with the grassroots, all in an effort to bring balance to representation in California. But then came along Gavin Newsom's career, and he's running for president. So that means he has to prove to the voters, and we talked about this a couple of times ago with Carlo Marinucci and his standing among Democrat voters. He needs to prove to them that he's a fighter, and so far he's doing that. So he comes along with Prop 50. And what is Prop 50? And why is it so important no matter where you are in the United States? Prop 50 is an effort to gerrymander California even more than it really is today. And California, more than a decade ago, put a constitutional amendment in to remove the drawing of districts from the legislature and put it in the hands of an independent commission. While the commission remains somewhat dominated by Democrats, but it does a far better job than leaving it just to Democrats. Already, of the 50 plus congressional seats, the Democrats dominate that in California, even though Trump got something like 44% of the vote. They get far more seats than that in the House of Representatives from California. But Gavin Newsom's response to Texas, which has a law permitting it to do redistricting in the manner in which they did, California doesn't have a law that permits the governor to push the legislature to draw new maps. So what did Gavin Newsom do? Gavin Newsom had put on the ballot a constitutional amendment that for the next 3 cycles, those maps would be drawn by the legislature in a very partisan fashion so that Republicans would be eliminated from numerous seats and be left with essentially 5 only in California. So why does Prop 50 matter? Well, let's go through this. And there you see the logo for my new group, electionfairness.com. And the goal of that group is to stop this rewrite of California law and to keep the maps somewhat fair instead of what Gavin Newsom is promising to do. So go to electionfairness.com when you get a chance, sign up and help us out. So let's cover these 5 points. Number 1. It makes the maps partisan. Again, there was an independent commission. They were supposed to draw what they called community of interest, meaning they wanted to group communities that are somewhat alike into congressional districts. And in that way, they keep communities in, say, the North Coast or the Central Valley, they keep them together so that people whose lifestyles and economics are somewhat the same, they stayed the same. So let's look at the maps that they've drawn just for your edification here. On the right is the current. And I want you to focus specifically in the upper right-hand corner in that light blue area. Those are way up north. They're on the very top of that is the Oregon border. In the upper right-hand corner, you have these very rural counties like Modoc County, Lassen County, and Trinity County. What's interesting about them, very rural farms, ranches, they have, like Modoc County has about 2 people per square mile. So there's your community of interest. Incredibly, all that blue are ranches and farmland by and large. Now go over to the map on the left and notice the upper portion of the state and the lime green. You have Modoc County, 2 people per square mile, and it goes all the way across the north. Trinity's in there, Del Norte's in there, Humboldt's in there, and it goes all the way down and it finishes at the bottom in San Francisco. So Gavin Newsom, in his drive to answer the move by Texas, even though he claims that's not the reason anymore, creates a community of interest with Modoc with 2 people per square mile with San Francisco. This is all a ploy to limit the number of Republicans and a bigger ploy for Gavin Newsom. This is bad for California. So let's go back to our 5 bullet points here. Number 1, it makes the maps partisan, as you can see. It's designed to remove Republicans. It will that new map will result in probably only 5 Republicans representing California at all in a state that has anywhere up to 40 million people in it at any one time. So it's blatantly partisan. I get it. Gerrymandering's been around 200 years. Both sides do it. The reality is the Democrats in their reliable blue states, about 19 of them, have done most of those states. They've already squeezed all the gerrymandering they can. Now they're just going for these last drops like California. Republicans, there's more reliable red states, about 25, 26, 27, and there's more runway for the Republicans. So this is a losing effort ultimately for the Democrats, but nevertheless, this is where Gavin Newsom comes into play. And here you have number 3. This is designed to help Gavin Newsom's career. Think about what's happening right now. Gavin Newsom is running pro-Prop 50 ads across the country. Why would he be doing that? 2 reasons. 1, he's pulling in money from across the country. George Soros, $20 million. He's recruited AOC to campaign for this. But what is this all doing? Why is his face all over the country? Because he's going to run for president. In December of 2026, he's going to announce for the Democrat nomination. He's already ahead in some early Democrat polls. This is about him. This is about him showing, quote, to the Democrats that he is a fighter. This isn't about communities of interest in California. Quite to the contrary. Point number 4. This is going to make things worse in California. Look, we all know Gavin Newsom's record. He's dead last in affordability. He is dead last in opportunity. It's ranked 50th in both those categories. What else is there? It's one of the worst states for crime. It's the highest in unemployment. It's the highest in poverty. What else do you care about? Okay, education. He's in the low 40s. Homelessness, number 1. We can go on and on and on. But if you care about crime, then if this passes, more defund the police style Democrats would be in Congress. So how does that help California? If you care about homelessness, more of the fund the homelessness complex, which is basically funding a permanent program. Well, if you're for more of homelessness because it's only grown under Newsom, then this is a good plan. But if you want to stop the homeless crisis in California or fix it, then Prop 50 hurts that. We can go issue by issue. California is #1 in unemployment in the country. That's ridiculous. It should have the lowest unemployment. Instead, it has the highest. Do you really think adding more Democrats to Congress will help California's unemployment crisis? What about water? Under Trump, love him or hate him, he did deals to bring more water to California. All those years where the Democrats had Congress or Obama, no deal on water. So if you care about water in California and therefore farming, you need water for farming, then Prop 50 will make matters worse. So, yes, I get that the big picture of this is the fight over the House of Representatives. But if you actually care about the California economy or you care about the people within it, almost every major issue, I can't think of one honestly that wouldn't be made worse, will be made worse by Prop 50 because there's no balance of representation. We need a greater balance between the parties in the state. We don't need a complete one-party state. And so my fourth point here is Prop 50 will make all the problems you care about, homelessness, crime, lack of water, on and on and on, joblessness. All of that will be worse after Prop 50, not better. So why would you vote for it? The last one is you can't trust Newsom. Now, this is the most ridiculous constitutional amendment I've ever seen in all my years. And I write history books. I got one of them over my shoulder. This constitutional amendment has to be a constitutional amendment because the redistricting independent commission is in the Constitution. So this is a temporary constitutional amendment in effect. And it's only good for the next 3 elections. And then it will go back to the independent commission. Well, let me ask you a question. Do you trust that after 3 times of this, that they're going to say, oh, let's just go back? No. What they're going to do is put a permanent measure on once they see. And how do we know that that would pass again? Well, think about it. If this passes, and then you have almost no Republican representation, the flight of Republicans out of the state will continue. And then it'd be easier for them to completely dispense with the independent commission. So if you care about California, Prop 50 is not for you. It will make more partisan maps, remove Republicans, boost Newsom for president, make California worse on all the issues, and then they'll make it permanent. That can't happen. We must stop Prop 50. And just go to electionfairness.com, electionfairness.com, simple site. You can help me out. We want to bring balance to California, not more of AOC, George Soros. Remember, Soros put in all those DAs that are being recalled. And we certainly don't need AOC's influence in California. Well, that's my opening argument. Join me at electionfairness.com, and we'll be right back with Craig Shirley on Trump's place in history. Welcome back, everyone, to Politics in Perspective. I'm particularly pleased today at this really important moment in history to have a man I consider a friend now, a phenomenal biographer, a true historian in Craig Shirley to talk about Trump's place in history. Craig, welcome back. How are you?
Thank you, Tom. I'm very well, thank you, especially for a Friday.
There you go. Now, listen, folks. I was watching the UN speech, incredibly sober speech. We'll bring up a BBC headline to intro this. This is what they saw in Europe. 7 years ago, his audience laughed. This year, they were silent. I saw, in my mind, that speech was akin to Reagan's evil empire speech. And what I mean by that is it was just a halting moment where people had to look at things differently. The media screamed on the left for the evil empire speech, saying, "How could you say that? You're not doing diplomacy the right way." Now, what's great about this great biographer is he's done one about Reagan, the Reagan Revolution, and Newt, 6 about Reagan, and Newt, both of whom upset the apple cart or
Yes,
kicked over the money changers table, if you will.
yes.
So, so, so I wanted to do a bit, and we're here today to listen to you talk about Trump's place in history, because presidents don't often do this. Sometimes they just go along.
You know, it's now lost to history, Tom. But Reagan in '82 took it to the United Nations, not as bluntly as Donald Trump did, but he urged them to get back to their original intent and purposes. It already descended into a cauldron of corruption, and as John Kennedy called it, a forum for invective. And that's what it was in '82, and it's only gotten worse over the years. You know what it reminds me of is that it reminds me of a giant Omega House. Remember Omega House from the movie Animal House, right? It is big, it is corrupt, it is pointless. It's counterproductive. They don't even make nice floats like they did in Animal House. It serves no purpose whatsoever. At least you can say about Delta House was that it protected maximum freedom, right? Everybody was free to do what they wanted to do, and that's really, well, what's at stake here is whether it's in the Bible and Christ and his search for freedom, or Washington and his search for freedom, or any of the revolutionaries of American history, of world history. Is always the issue is about power, and it's always the issue about who has power and who doesn't, and who has freedom and who doesn't. And so the ones that stand out to you and to me and to most sane people are the ones who stand up for freedom, who stand up against corruption, who stand up against status quo. And they're very upsetting to the status quo because look, the delegates in the United Nations are very happy in their sinecure. They got 13 billion last year from the United States Treasury. $13 billion just for 1 year. So they're very happy, and they've got diplomatic immunity, so they can do whatever they want to with mayhem. They can run me over with a car and not suffer the consequences. They can shoot me down in the street and not suffer consequences. Is that's been perverted out of control, and you're hard pressed. I'm hard pressed to name one good thing the United Nations has done since its inception in beginnings of its inception in 1945. There, with Harry Truman was the first president to actually address the United Nations, and I think he spoke to it 8 times. But it started actually in the Roosevelt administration, and Eleanor Roosevelt was a great impetus behind the creation of the United Nations, and it seemed a natural outgrowth of World War II with the idea of preventing another world war, but it's done anything but.
Okay, so let's concentrate. There's been, we're at 47 presidents.
Yes,
The bigger government gets, the harder it is to veer it in a different direction.
yes,
Reagan veered it in a different direction. In Congress, Newt Gingrich veered it differently, right? 38 straight years under Democrats.
yes,
Uh, Trump is taking on the Goliath. He's taking on the UN. He's taking on uh, the American establishment, deep state, all of it combined. So, what should a listener understand about how Reagan succeeded in your view of what? And I know you're writing a book about Trump as we speak.
Yes.
Uh, what can you compare and contrast and give us some understanding about what a great leader does to do that?
Great leader reframes the agenda. Great leader argues, somebody once said a great leader has a physical, intellectual, and moral presence. And if you think about the great leaders of history, whether it is Washington or Abraham Lincoln or Franklin Roosevelt for that matter, or Reagan or even or Trump, is that they have a physical, intellectual, moral presence. Intellectual, I don't mean by book sense, I mean by common sense. That's the true measure of intellectualism is common sense. The bureaucrats in Washington and the bureaucrats in the United Nations fancy themselves as intellectuals, but if things are going bad all the time and getting worse all the time, I'm hard pressed to point out where the intellectualism is. My definition of intellectualism is that things that somebody invents something or creates something or challenges something to improve the human condition or improve the infrastructure or improve schooling or improve education or improve whatever anybody does. The true measurement I think of intellectualism is, do they create and improve things from the status quo.
You look at Reagan. Reagan came into office. Remember Alan Cranston screaming about nuclear weapons, Ronnie Reagan.
Yeah.
Right out of the gate, there were issues about him. You had the firing, the
Air traffic controllers.
all of that. So when he
Yeah.
got to Washington, was it this same sense that, he said government's not the solution, government's the problem. By the way, government's 4 times as big as now as when he said it.
Right.
But um, what was that fight like? And in your view, how did he succeed?
Oh, it was a vicious fight because the Democrats knew, the liberals knew Reagan's election in 1980 signaled the end of the New Deal. The Democrats had dominated American politics from 1932 onward. Eisenhower was an aberration because he was a war hero. But Democrats had dominated national politics for many years, starting in 1932 with the rise of the New Deal and Franklin Roosevelt. And the idea, before 32, people didn't think if they had a flood or a tornado or economic deprivation or something, they didn't think about turning to government. They just dealt with it as best they could. It was only starting in the New Deal that people started turning to government as the panacea for what ailed them. So FDR grew many programs. So of course it didn't help. He said so, and I wrote in one of my books that FDR said in 39 or 40 that the New Deal had failed as a political experiment. Unemployment in America was almost as high in 1939, 1940 as it had been in 1932 and 33. So the New Deal, I mean, it gave people hope, and I'll always defend that portion of it. But it started the idea that government, could win World War II. Government could build the interstate highway system. Government could at least try to alleviate the plight of the Great Depression. Government could put men into space. But starting in 1963, with the assassination of John Kennedy, people started having a different view of government. Government couldn't save John Kennedy. Government couldn't save Martin Luther King. Government couldn't save Robert Kennedy. Government couldn't win the Vietnam War. Government couldn't stop out of control inflation. Government, is that government could lose the Cold War to the Soviet Union. So people started souring on government, and it laid the groundwork for Reagan to take advantage of that in 1980 and point to a different solution than just simply saying, well, we need a more government program. We need more government agency. We need more government regulations. Reagan said, no, the individual is the answer, not government. And that's where power should belong. And since that time, the debate has always been about the individual where power should belong. Uh, Reagan, the libertarian conservative, believed that power belonged with the individual, and power. He knew power can neither be destroyed nor created; it can only be moved around. And since 1932, had been moving toward Washington and toward government and away from the individual. And he wanted to move it back. And of course, power manifests itself in many different ways. It's not just it's the ability to move, it's the ability to spend, it's the ability to be free of nuclear threat, it's the ability for unborn baby to live. So power. Reagan introduced this new paradigm, which is with us today. Trump ran on all of Reagan's issues in this last election. He ran on less government, more freedom. He ran on tax cuts. He ran on strong national defense. He ran on, with freedom, obviously, is at the central core, the human freedom, just as it was for Reagan in 1980. So, and that's where we find ourselves today, is debating how much or how little power government should have, as opposed to how much or how little power the individual should have.
Okay, so I have a saying that I swear I heard somewhere else, and I've been trying to find it, but that leadership is as much physical as it is intellectual, if not more. And what I mean by
Yeah.
that is Washington was on his horse near the battles. Uh, and Trump is a very physical presence. He doesn't speak, disappear, and let others do the work. He is there saying we are going to accomplish this, and so leadership is physical. It's not just intellectual. Your thoughts?
I agree. I agree. As I said before, is that a true leader has a physical, intellectual, and moral presence. And moral, I mean, that's easy to figure out. Is that his set of values are right, and his opponent's set of values are wrong. Jesus Christ his set of values are right, and Julius Caesar's were wrong. George Washington's moral values were right, and the British governments were wrong. Ronald Reagan's moral values were right, and the I'm not going to say Jimmy Carter personally, but the Washington establishment, the status quo, their moral values were wrong. And the same thing with Donald Trump, is that his moral values are right, and that is look at the moral values now of the left who opposes him. Virulent anti-Semitism, abortion on demand. They call it redistribution economics. I just call it just stealing. Is that and but so he has the moral high ground because he's defending the individual, and the left knows it too. That's why I say the reason, Tom, is the left is turned to violence is because they know our ideas are better than their ideas. Because human freedom is always better than state freedom. And B is that we're winning and they're losing. Is that look at the gubernatorial races in Virginia and New Jersey are too close to call. These are two traditionally Democratic states, but it's very, very possible that Republicans could win in both states. I mean, that is evidence right there of the changing paradigm of American politics. Is that patriotism is back in vogue. I saw an interesting thing happen the other day, Tom. Down in Florida, workers were tearing up pride flags that were painted on crosswalks. I think that's an astonishing cultural shift. Is that people have gone to jail for riding their bicycles on painted pride flags, and now they're
Yeah.
tearing them up. And that is, I believe, that's the Trump effect. Trump has changed everything in American politics.
Okay, so I want to go back to the violence. I wrote a piece not long ago that the Democrats have become the party of protests.
Yeah.
And the supposition or the collateral effect of that is If you protest, you may get people to reconsider an issue, but protesters don't belong in power. They're
No.
not to be trusted with power. So if you look at the 60s and all those protests, you had they revived Nixon's career. If it wasn't for Watergate, uh, the Republicans would have won again. And the only reason why Ford lost was the Watergate slash pardon. He almost
Yes.
wound up winning. Then you
Yes.
had Reagan Bush. Um, Clinton didn't get a majority vote either time,
No.
and the Reform Party helped him win. If you look at it, being the party of protests, that if they stay in this current vein of protest now assassination, they could be writing a story where they don't get back in the White House for some time. Your thoughts on that?
I think it's worse than that, Tom. I think we are witnessing in real time. This is a moment we're going to tell our grandchildren about. I already have grandchildren. I don't know if you do or not. Uh, but but we're going to tell our grandchildren about. We're witnessing the death of the Democratic Party, and it's happened before in American history. You know, who remembers the anti-Masonic Party? I mean, in the 1830s and 1840s, excuse me, they were a real force in America. They elected members to the Congress, several senators, and they had a decisive role in at least one presidential election. Is that the anti-Masonic Party died? Is that another political party, the Whigs, died because they couldn't decide whether they're pro-slavery or anti-slavery, and so they died and were replaced by the Republican Party. We're witnessing the death of the Democratic Party. It will still continue to elect local candidates, but as a national party, it is on life support. I mean, look at all the polling is it's clear as the nose on my face. On the polling, I just saw yesterday on CNN on everything from the economy to immigration to crime to even on issues like education. The Republican Party is winning over the Democratic Party. Is that their Democratic Party is their polling is they're winning on the environment and transgender rights. I mean, that's their platform, right? That's their
Yeah.
platform. Now it's violence, murder, and transgender rights in the environment. I mean, that's not a winning message.
Yeah, I tell people that once in history, once socialism infects a party, it takes it over, and there's no releasing of it. And
No,
the current socialist will be at king of the mountain will step on the back. The new guy will come along and step on their back and push them down, and they'll be forgotten. Look at how they've treated Biden. Forget the dimension, all of that. Biden's people essentially gave the left wing of that party everything they wanted, and now they don't exist at all, and they're on to the next.
that is interesting because the behavior of the Democratic Party since 1952 has been to I hate that cliche kick to the curb, and it's so shop worn. Speaking of cliches, uh, um, but Harry Truman left office with a 22% approval in January of 53. LBJ was hounded out of the White House. Jimmy Carter was hounded out of the White House. Walter Mondale became a pariah. Michael Dukakis became a pariah. John Kerry became I mean, he had an appointment in the Biden administration, but it was a joke appointment. Everybody knew it was a fraud being, as Trump just said the other day, a giant fraud being perpetrated on the world and on the American people. Global warming is that the Democrats are not good to their losers. I mean, whether it was Gerald Ford, we embrace our losers. Is that now the party has changed. We don't embrace the Bushes, but that's because the party has changed dramatically from them. But Nixon Nixon went through a revival after he resigned, after he spent his time in in purgatory. He went through a somewhat of a revival in the 80s. He was writing books, he was giving speeches. Is that he partially revived his reputation. I mean, they're never going to live down Watergate, obviously, but he did a pretty good job, coming back from that. He didn't just and the party was willing to listen to him, at least some of the party. Is that I think that if you look at history, we are much better to our losers than Democrats are. And I think that just goes to the behavior of Democrats.
So, before we turn back to Reagan Trump, the, the technological world,
Yeah.
Reagan mastered it at the time, right?
Yeah.
And that was of great help to him.
Yes.
And, but he wasn't omnipresent. It wasn't every minute of everyday access. And I think so there's this overload, I think, occurring. There's no majesty
Probably.
left.
Yes.
And so I'm wondering what your thoughts on that, because the as the technological world takes over, think about Teddy Roosevelt and the phrase bully pulpit.
Yes.
There was such they had such an ability to grasp the moment. Is that disappear? Is the bully pulpit
Yes.
disappearing, and does it
Yes.
matter?
Yes. Yeah, you're exactly right. Is that it used to be when a president asked for network time, he was just automatically granted it. ABC, NBC, CBS to give in a speech to the country. And guess what? Everybody watched. Everybody watched their president give a speech on the Cuban Missile Crisis, or on the Vietnam War, or on Reagan got national attention many times. Was never turned down by one of the networks. Now they routinely turn down. They don't even ask them anymore. That and actually presidential speeches in that from the Oval Office have kind of fallen by the way. FDR would give his fireside chats, and he'd be listened to by millions. Is that you know I was at once asked how Reagan was handle the technology of today, and my answer was, talking pictures were a new phenomenon in the 30s and in late 30s, and yet Reagan mastered it. Radio was a new phenomenon, yet well, first of all, radio before the movies. Reagan, in the 30s, early 30s, mastered radio. In the late 30s, he mastered television. In every step of the way, whether it was press conferences or whatever, Reagan mastered it. So, I was asked, how would you handle the technology today? I said, if Reagan was alive today, he'd be on Twitter and he'd be on Facebook. He not only was he good at technology, not only was he fascinated by technology, but he understood the power of technology.
Yeah, and so that's a great comparison with Trump as well, because his first election, he didn't kowtow and give interviews to campaign. He went around the media directly with Twitter. And
Yes,
so
exactly.
both of these guys, so they're both their anti-establishment stance included the media.
Well, there used to be a phrase when Zareen and I, we were in Washington all through the 80s. We both worked for Reagan. And there used to be a phrase there when Reagan wanted to talk to the American people. The phrase was he would go over the heads of the Washington establishment, and he would get national TV time, and he would be granted national TV time to talk directly to the American people about support for his tax cuts, or support for his military initiatives, or his national defense initiatives. But the phrase "go over the heads," um, and that's obviously what Trump did and continues to do too. Is that he uses technology and the new media to go over the heads of the Washington establishment.
Okay, so another Trump's place in history we're talking about as a president. Another phenomenon is how aggressive this administration is on so many fronts. So
Yes.
I used to say, you can tell me I'm wrong, And most presidents in history have one, two, maybe three or four, if they're really good initiatives that they get for which they get remembered or make a huge difference. I don't think Trump is trying to do a dozen or more. Your thoughts?
No, no, that's funny. It reminds me of a friend of mine used to say, "What is the bumper sticker identification for that president?" If you said Lincoln, well, he freed the slaves, right? That's the bumper sticker. If you said George Washington, is that he won the revolution and became the first president? That's the bumper sticker. If Reagan's was is that he beat the communists and restored American morale. Is that you can always reduce them down. It's oversimplification, but reduce them down. Trump too, I think, is that he beat the establishment and reasserted the individual in America. I think that that's not a good bumper sticker, but you can reduce him down to his work and his presidency down to a concise bumper sticker that people can rally around, people can gather around. Uh, uh, you know, that's yeah.
All right, so running out of time here, but be remiss not to get some of your thoughts on the Charlie Kirk phenomenon. When I'm asked about this, and the Charlie Kirk effect, I hearken back to what Nixon called the silent majority,
Yeah.
and that he believed that yes, there were the protesters and those that are out there proclaiming what they think America was, but he believed that there was a majority of Americans that still believed in traditional America. So I look at Charlie Kirk and I say the Charlie Kirk effect was to revive or to bring to the forefront the silent morality of America. That there are many Americans still in that vein, not far from where Nixon was talking about, but a silent group of the silent morality. Your thoughts?
I agree entirely. This will be a seminal moment in American history. This is the rights Tet Offensive, where the American citizenry came out of the jungles to reassert their belief and their place in American society, culture, and politics. And it's quite overwhelming. I think it signals the beginning of the end of wokeism in America, is that they're completely on the defensive, whether, I mean, that's why they're resorting to violence, because they know they're losing. But the right is on offense on every issue, and it's not just because of Donald Trump, but a lot of it is. But that's what my book is really about, Tom. Is that there are probably two other elections in America where there were just a clash of cultures, the outsiders versus the insiders. One was 1828, Andrew Jackson versus John Quincy Adams.
I
And
talk
we
about
know
that a lot. Thanks. I love that, and I wrote a piece comparing Trump to Andrew Jackson. But go on.
Well, you're right. Yeah, you're right. And then 1980 with Reagan versus Carter. Reagan was the outsider. Carter was the insider. Carter represented the status quo. Reagan represented radical change. Radical change in government, radical change in our thinking. We just on the issue of coexistence with the Soviets. We've been détente and coexistence had governed our behavior since the end of World War II. Reagan was the first president who came along and said, "No, we're not going to coexist with the Soviets. We're going to defeat them." I mean, that is a radical thought. When he forces Mikhail Gorbachev to say the future of the world is freedom. Toward the end of the Reagan presidency, Gorbachev says the future of the world is freedom. For the former head of the Communist Party, the former head of the Soviet Union, to utter such a phrase, the collectivist philosophy is rejected by the head of collectivism. That is radical. That is a signal moment in world history and human history. Is that so? This election was obviously Biden represented the corrupt status quo, and Trump represented the outside, uh, uh, the outside common sense citizenry, and Charlie Kirk's assassination simply furthers the war, is a terrible, awful, unfortunate casualty. But if there's a benefit to his passing, it's that the right is asserting itself, reasserting itself, and like the silent majority, as you mentioned, or the Tet Offensive, as I mentioned, is reasserting itself. I mean, in every measurable way, is whether it's the ratings of liberal programming on television, whether it's church attendance, whether it's political activism, whether it is the support for Israel and the standing up to anti-Semitism, is that the right is asserting itself. And the one last thing, and I'll shut up, is that I remember a time where conservatives were ashamed to be conservatives. That's no longer true. Is that conservatives are brave, and it's the liberals who are the cowards.
Yeah. Well, and they've run out of. I agree with you. They've run out of relevancy, and so they're acting out.
Yes, exactly.
And they don't have. I always chafe at these. Oh, they have no new ideas. Okay, well, it turns out human nature doesn't change all the time. So
No.
there are certain lessons of history, lessons of the American civilization where things work, and you should return to them. On the other hand, uh, uh, the lessons of socialism are pretty damn clear. They always fail. So why there
Oh,
is no new idea in socialism? It's always ends up failing.
in every instance, in every example, whether the Soviet Union or the Soviet, the Warsaw Pact, or Venezuela, or Vietnam, even in China, in a way, is China is an unusual uh, system because it's an oligarchy. It's literally an oligarchy. It's big corporations blended with big government, and that's really an oligarchy. But I saw a couple of years ago in a Wall Street Journal that the Chinese official was quoted as saying the reason we want to stimulate the economy by enacting Reagan-style tax cuts, which I thought was an astonishing quote coming from a Chinese official. We want to establish Ronald Reagan type tax cuts.
Yeah. Well, Declaration of Independence was quoted in the Vietnamese constitution or something like that.
Ideas,
So
ideas have no borders. Ideas have no borders.
there you go. All right, Craig, I could spend all day with you, and I need to get
Likewise,
down.
Tom.
Need to get down to your ranch and spend some time with you. I appreciate you joining Politics and Perspective
Oh, it was a lot of
today.
fun. Thank you, Tom. Have a great weekend.
All right, take care. We'll be right back with more of Politics and Perspective. Welcome back to Politics in Perspective. I hope you enjoyed Craig Shirley's view about it, comparing Trump to Reagan and other great revolutionaries, and also his place in history in changing the direction of government. It's very rare for any one person to do such a thing. And it's getting harder and harder the bigger government gets. Okay, let's go to segment 3, which is our political roundup. I wrote a piece this week about Kamala Harris, her tell-all, which is actually going to wind up being an end-all. But before we get to that, excuse me, let's talk about James Comey, who got indicted at the end of the week. And this is a long time coming. James Comey is a bad man, literally a bad human being. He betrayed the American experiment with freedom. He thought, and his cadres thought that they could save the country by by thwarting the system to get their outcome. But the whole point of the American experiment was to stop people from thinking they know better and deciding things. That they trusted the process that they were handing people so that good could come out of it. So James Comey, all the way through his career, cheated the system, lied. Unquestionably, he took government documents and gave it to his, I think his Columbia professor friend to publish. Well, when you work for the government, this just in, you don't own anything that you create. It belongs to, I don't know, you might have heard this phrase, we the people. But he took it and gave it to someone else. That's a crime. Depending on the nature of what you gave them, it could be a very serious penalty. Because if you give them confidential information and the like, that's a felony. He basically admitted to that. His Columbia professor friend admitted to that. He also outright lied about things that he did. He lied to Congress. He told Congress he didn't do that. Well, so now he's indicted for it. And you know what? He should go to jail because the Brennans, the Clappers, the Comeys misused the American system, lied to Congress, committed felonies. And if we don't put them in jail, what's to stop someone from doing it in the future? There has to be accountability. And I'm glad that James Comey is going to pay for his lies. He lied to the FISA court. He entrapped General Flynn. He tried to entrap Trump. He literally had a meeting with Trump to see if he could get him to admit something. This is the newly elected president, and Comey saw fit to try to entrap him and never told Trump that Hillary paid for the dossier, which Comey knew. He's a very bad man, and I hope justice comes to James Comey. Now let's turn to Kamala Harris. As you know, I ran against Kamala Harris in 2015-16 U.S. Senate race. I got to know her just a little bit. I got to know her staff just a little bit. But, you know, I've been around California politics, and she's led a charmed life. She had an upper middle class upbringing in a nice area of the Bay Area. She had a relationship with Willie Brown. She parlayed that relationship. I'm trying to be kind with the words here. She became DA of San Francisco. He handpicked her. She became Attorney General. He essentially cleared the field for her to be U.S. Senator. And then she was plucked out of a terrible presidential race to become vice president. That's a pretty charming existence. But what she was never was someone who worked hard enough to deserve those positions. She enjoyed her status, but she didn't cultivate it. She didn't make alliances. She didn't spend her time as vice president helping other Democrats. You know, when you're vice president, you have ambitions. You assist the president, but you go around the country helping other Democrats get elected so that when you run for office, they support you. She didn't do much of that. When she was AG, she barely ran a campaign. She was from Northern California. All the voters, or most of the voters, are in Southern California. She didn't go down and cultivate them and make herself beloved throughout the state. No, she coasted. She has a career of coasting, being plucked, being picked for her status, not for the work that she had done. And then she ran for president, and that came home to roost. Her lack of studying, her lack of alliances, all of that shown up. And then she writes this book. It's a tell-all. It's a gossip book. It's not a leadership book. If she was serious about the future, she should have written a book that says, here's my path to the presidency, or here's what's best for America, or what I learned along the way. Something about the future and what can be done. Instead, she writes a book that discloses certain details and blames a lot of people for why she didn't win in 107 days. And that's will be the end. She wrote a tell-all, but it's going to wind up being her end-all. Well, that's our show for this week. Once again, I want to thank Ex America News on Twitter, worldviewtube.com for carrying the show. You can catch it at Political Vanguard, AUN TV. And thanks so much for joining us. And we'll be back next week with another edition of Politics in Perspective. Thanks so much.